Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Aggieville Alleycats podcast, where come rain, shine, or anything in between, we're in Liberty, the Kansas State sporting news you so love. It's just me, Ace Edwards, for this episode. It'll probably just be me for the preview for North Dakota as well. And emphasis on the rain when it comes to this game, because K-State ends up dropping the season opener up against Iowa State. Season opener, conference opener. K-State ends up losing 21-24. And to sort of get my the top level thoughts out of the way is, no, I don't think that it was a mistake to play the game in Ireland. No, I don't think Iowa State wins with normal conditions, because every single game with Iowa State has to be weird somehow. But and I also wouldn't change the location from Ireland. It's generally pretty good for exposure. It was a good experience for everyone. Well, not everyone, but you know what I mean. But this is, you may not be able to tell immediately, but this is probably the angriest I've been at a K-State loss since the loss to Tulane in the Big 12 championship season. But even then, I'm angry for different reasons. With the Tulane game, I could articulate my anger and I could direct it at one particular individual, that being the offensive scheming of Colin Klein. This one I can't really direct it at any one thing or any one individual, because there was, at no point in the game was there a complete moment. Everyone had their specific points of failure. And I think that's kind of what makes this hurt the most, is it wasn't a complete game. And there was no one, they were hitting all the right notes, but they weren't playing in a symphony together, I think is probably the best way to put it. But the other big, I'm not going to call it controversies, but I think things people are going to question are the fourth down decisions. The one in the first half where they didn't take the 3, I think they were inside the 10. It was a 4th and 1. And yeah, that one, I would have taken the 3 just because it's so early in the game. And to give you a little insight on how I look at football games, I tend to look at them in the way of possessions. So when you're in a tie game, you almost always want to take the points, because that does put you up a possession, or you could view it as half a possession. But I get why you'd want to be aggressive there, because, theoretically a 4th and 1 should be a pretty easy pickup. And play call wasn't bad. It was just good prediction by Iowa State. So, sort of get burnt once, that's fine. The other big one was the 4th and 1 on their own side of the field, where they run a quarterback sweep. The other bit of controversy that people have was they think it was a bad spot. I also agree it was a bad spot, but it was a bad spot that I kind of get. I understand, especially when there's no lines on the field. I'm really trying to not let the anger come out, because I don't want it to come out early. But QB sweep, not the greatest play call in the situation. And that one, I wholly disagree with going for it when you're on that side of the field. And again, it all goes back to possessions, because, you go from, you're down 3, maybe you're able to punt it. It just, to me, it showed a lack of faith in the defense at the time. And that it doesn't alter my decision making that defense kind of got ran all over in the ensuing drive. That doesn't affect how I viewed it at the time, especially when you have all 3 of your timeouts. So I didn't like either of the decisions to go for it, or at least the major ones. I think there was another, but it's just, neither of them sit right with me, and I don't think that either of them was a particularly good decision. And you look at the difference on the score, and I know that the game would have gone differently if they took the 3 when they got that opportunity and went for it on the 4th and 1 on the Iowa State 10. I know that the score is not going to end up the same, but you still end up staring at it. Oh, it was a 3-point game. So, maybe we go tie and it's an overtime game. But the other thing I want to mention before I get into game day grades for K-State was I didn't walk away from this thinking that Iowa State was the more talented team. I walked away as like, wow, Iowa State continuously gets breaks, and in a lot of ways they make their own breaks. And this is the part that's going to sort of disgust me the most, is that Matt Campbell has kind of outcoached Chris Kleiman in the last meetings, and they keep getting the breaks, and they make the breaks by outcoaching the other team. And you look at their stat lines, and there is nothing particularly impressive about it. I mean, they have a total of that's 313 yards. K-State ends up having 383, outgaining them. But they just end up winning. Rocco Becht has, for the vast majority of the game, had a sub 50% completion percentage. I'll give it to him. There were a lot of drops, but some of those are on the quarterback as well because of your inability to throw a non-fastball. But Rocco Becht came up with the throws when it mattered most in the fourth quarter. And, he should have thrown an interception. K-State couldn't capitalize. Again, it's another tough play for Donovan McIntosh to make on that interception. But it doesn't make it hurt any less, because people have sort of been tossing around like, oh, does Chris Kleiman have an Iowa State problem? And my immediate reaction is like, no, they don't. And it's getting harder and harder to say that. And frankly, that's upsetting. It's damn annoying. It's really, really, really damn annoying to deal with that. But now we can sort of go into game day grades, where we go through every single position group from quarterback, offensive line, all of them, including coordinators, giving them a grade from F, meaning they're near single-handedly lost us the game, to A+, meaning they're near single-handedly won us the game. I'm going to tell you right now, there are absolutely no A's in this performance for this week. Starting off with the quarterback, the man under center. Now, Avery Johnson, his final stat line was 21 of 30, 273 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. A lot of people, and there were 8 for 21 in terms of rushing, including a touchdown. So 3 total touchdowns, no turnovers. There are people who have been critical of Avery Johnson in this game. And the funny thing is that I think the people who are being critical of him are being critical of him for the wrong reasons. Because Avery Johnson, the best way that I can describe it is, if you've ever played any of the college football games or even Madden, you know that the first thing that they're going to do in Madden is they're almost always going to throw the drag route or the check down, because it's almost always technically, if you're taking pure logic base into it, that's always going to be the safest and theoretically best throw. Avery Johnson played this game like a Madden quarterback. And in a lot of ways, that has a place. That has a place, those sort of safe completions that don't put the ball into harm's way. However, I also know for a fact that if he waits another second on any of those throws that he ends up throwing into the flat, that's probably a much easier first down. So he didn't put the ball into harm's way, except for one throw that I'm thinking of that was almost picked. I think it was a throw to Jerron Tibbs. It was just a little bit off up the sideline. But as a consequence of that, he was throwing to the flats a lot. And again, you can make a career out of throwing to the flats, but when you're behind the sticks and you have a third down play call, and this was especially an issue earlier in the game, you have to throw past the sticks, or you have to take that extra half second to get to that second read, to get to that throw that's much easier to get in terms of first down yardage. And he did get better throughout the game. I'm thinking of the throws to Jace and Jaron Tibbs in the back end of the game, which we'll talk about the receivers soon. But this is a game that if you look, he had two very, very good throws to Jace, and to Jaron Tibbs, or not Tibbs, Jaron Bradley, I should say. And it just ended up coming up short, and those were his two touchdown passes of the day. He had his rushing touchdown. People were saying, oh, he should have scrambled more, he should have used his legs more. I think Avery has the mentality that he's going to scramble to extend plays rather than scramble for yardage. And it's not a bad thing, it's a philosophy, but I understand how it can be very frustrating for people to watch someone who is as athletically gifted as Avery Johnson and not watch him take off and instead, take that extra second to see if there's a throw available downfield. I understand getting frustrated with that, but to me, Avery left so many yards on the field by just not being patient enough to let the play develop, especially when he wasn't getting pressured all that often. The offensive line did a great job of pass blocking. There is another side to that coin that we will talk about, but Avery Johnson is far from the reason that K-State lost this game, especially early on when it was destroying the field with rain. I ended up giving Avery a B, and there's so much variance with these grades to me because, again, I don't think that you can point to any one group and say, oh, they had the day that cost K-State the game, because everyone had their points of failure. But I will say that the group I was least impressed with on the day was the running back room. They ended up getting a D for me. Now, I know Dylan Edwards got hurt on the first punt of the game, and that was sort of when the vibes became atrocious, and there was very little hope because, even if it didn't end up resulting in 7 points or any points for Iowa State because they fumbled it right back, it was sort of that, oh, here we go again moment, and Dylan Edwards ended up getting hurt, which I think contributed to a significant amount of the growing pains in the first half play calling. But Joe Jackson goes 12 for 51, ends up fumbling the ball once. Devon Rice goes 5 for 9. Though I will say that Devon Rice, he did better than his stat line would indicate. He just kind of got a few raw deals with a backwards pass being counted against his rushing yards and not getting great blocking. But I thought Devon Rice actually looked pretty good. I thought he looked fine given the action he was given. Joe Jackson also looked fine other than the fumble. He looks fast. But there's nothing that the running backs did that really wows you. And they didn't contribute near enough to a game that basically Iowa State was daring K-State to beat them multiple ways. And there were a few drives where K-State was able to do that, mostly through the passing game. But early on, when it was a running game, K-State couldn't get anything going. And I don't think it would have been too much different with Dylan Edwards back there, but still, the turnovers are what gave them a D, bordering on a D-. Now, the group that I was actually pretty, reasonably impressed with was the wide receiver room. I'm not going to say that they get the same grade as, the quarterback room. I ended up giving them just a flat C because, they had a few drops, and those drops were very, very painful, one of them being costly with Jaron Bradley dropping one on a scramble drill from Avery Johnson. When you look at the receiving stat lines, and, you're not going to complain about 4 for 78 for Jace and a touchdown, 3 for 75 and a touchdown for Jaron Bradley, Jaron Tibbs 4 for 35. So, you end up getting decent production from your top 3 wide receivers. And I think even Adonis Mosey ended up getting into the game and getting a snap or two. But it's the drops that really end up hurting K-State. And honestly, it's Avery being sort of under-aggressive or being too conservative early on in the game that does hurt their grade. And there were a few times that, the slant pattern to Jace, he should have caught, but it was behind him. Jaron Bradley should have caught that ball. It hit him on the hands on the scramble drill. So there are just a few drops that you end up looking at as like, damn, that really would have helped move the chains, really would have helped the offense sort of settle in. So I ended up giving them a C. There was one play in particular that almost raised it up an entire letter grade, and that was Jace Brown on the touchdown pass, sending some poor white safety to meet God, and that was one of the best routes that I've ever seen a K-State receiver run, and that's always been Jace's calling card, is his elite route running. So that almost raised it up to like a B- for me, but still, I ended up giving them a C. Part of that isn't even really their fault. And the tight ends, there's only one drop that I remember, and that's the Will Swanson drop, which, again, the ball was at his feet, but you still have to catch that in that situation. Garrett Oakley goes 5 for 62. Willancio, 1 for 1. Braden Lofton, 1 for 18. So I thought they did fine. To me, that's like a B performance, especially with Garrett Oakley making some catches in the clutch. And there's nothing really else I can say there. The offensive line is a complicated grade because in terms of pass blocking, yeah, they were great in terms of pass blocking. Iowa State ends up registering 1 sack. I genuinely do not remember when that sack happened, but I mean, the offensive line did a great job of pass blocking and at minimum giving Avery an opportunity to get out and giving him an escape route, even if there was additional pressure coming, which Iowa State does a notoriously bad job of disguising their pressures. But the run blocking was just awful. Like they'd get their initial assignment and block their 3 down front, and then they would just whiff on the linebackers. So it's a unit that did, like, if this was pure pass blocking, they'd probably get an A-, but run blocking, they'd get like a D. So to me, it averages out to a C+. Though I will say John Pastore did get punished for winning a run blocking rep and getting a pancake by calling it a hold. That it didn't kill the drive, but it was damn annoying. Though that was that last drive, so you could make an argument that it altered the play calling enough to where you wouldn't get in that 4th and 1 situation, but at that point you're splitting hairs. I was happy with the pass blocking. I was extremely disappointed with the run blocking, especially against a team that was so poor against the run last year in a game that we needed the running game at the beginning. So I ended up giving them a C+. We always cover the coordinators last, but I think I'm going to alter the formula to talk about Matt Wells in this game. Matt Wells is someone that caught a whole lot in the way of flack for his play calling this game. And I'll stick up for him, someone making more money than I probably ever will in a year. I'll leave the big bad offensive coordinator alone. But I'll stick up for him is that the concepts that he was calling in the passing game were generally good, and they were generally well suited to the situation. Avery was just far too quick triggered on hitting the check down. And I'm not going to blame Matt Wells for that. His run game scheming, other than that RPO quarterback counter and the RPO slant, it was kind of what I feared, where it was much more vanilla than I really would have liked and what we're really used to at K-State under Connor Riley and Colin Klein. I really wish that he deployed more of that jet motion, that jet fake motion, where Avery can you can get the defense going one way, then Avery either follows behind him and it's a bad angle for the linebacker, or it's just a counter play. I wish that he used that a lot more than he did. The pistol running concepts, I think he ran just a little bit of either trap or base. So run game scheming was just painfully okay. And granted, there is not much that he could have done with the passing game in that first quarter when it was just destroying down rain. And that really hurt him because he's always been despite his run-pass splits, where he's always, theoretically been more of a running guy, a lot of his game was based on those RPOs and those RPO screenplays. Well, those get infinitely harder in the rain, so you have to be more vanilla in how you're calling your running game, and that hurt him a lot. So there were a few times that there were times that I was just straight up saying, take away the check down. During the game, just take away the check down route as an option and sort of make Avery sit down and make a more aggressive decision. But this is another one I struggled with. I ended up giving Matt Wells a C. And there were concerns about, why aren't you using Avery's legs more? I think people forget that, Avery not only had 8 carries, but there were times that it just kind of wasn't working, or he called his own read and Iowa State was taking Avery, so he had to hand the ball off. So this is a lot of credit to Iowa State for playing disciplined defense, which, again, giving credit to Iowa State disgusts me because Matt Campbell looks like a camel that has been let loose on 30 packs of menthols, and Rocco Beck looks like the caveman from the Geico ads. But I mean, it's true. They had a really, really good game plan, so all credit in the world to them. Now we can move on to the defense, starting with the defensive line. Now, the defensive line was making life for Rocco Beck to living hell, and this is where Rocco Beck's ability to move out of the pocket was exceptional, because there was probably 6 or 7 sacks that K-State should have got. Ended up walking away with 4. Jordan Allen gets credited with 1. Toby Osunsanmi ends up getting credited with 2. Quay Moss ends up getting 1. That's a DB, so we'll talk about him later. But the pressure was consistent, and the pressure was pretty relentless throughout the entirety of the game. And that's even when they were just sending 3 or 4. Chidi Obiizor, also, he didn't register a sack, but he ends up having one hell of a game. ESPN has him listed as 1 TFL, probably should be credited for another. And he was just an absolute force on the defensive line. And again, towards that back end, when K-State sort of was getting ran all over, I think that was just a case of them getting tired because the offense couldn't sustain a damn drive. So, I don't blame them. And if K-State won this game, the defensive line would be getting an A+ for sure, because they had an amazing game in terms of pass rush and were able to pretty well stick to their rush lanes in the running game. But because they didn't win, end up just getting an A. The linebackers, this to me was the disappointing group, because although Austin Romaine did end up getting 8 total tackles, then Gabe Powers 4, Des Purnell only gets credit with 1. I'm not so sure about that. And Rex Van Wy ends up getting credited with 2. They found themselves out of position in a way that I can't help but think they wouldn't have been more often in that true 3-3 stack front, because they were kind of playing the run like they were still playing in a 3-3 stack, where they do get that extra sort of step where they can step forward, and then because there is another linebacker there, they can afford to take that extra half step, and they just couldn't afford to do that in this game. They could not afford to do that, especially in the second half. And you look at it, there's only 130 yards rushing, but it's when those yards rushing came that mattered most, sort of towards the back end of the game with Carson Hansen to ice away the rest of the game and ice away K-State's chances of getting the ball back. But Austin Romaine had a solid game. I wouldn't say it was his best. I wouldn't say it was anywhere near his best, but I walked away kind of disappointed and gave the linebackers a B-. Now, I think the controversial one is going to be the defensive backs, because I thought the corners had an excellent day. Yeah, they end up giving up 2 passing touchdowns, and that just kind of happens, especially when you put a safety on a slot fade. That's just a good play call by them. I'm not going to put Wesley Fair on a cross for giving up a slot fade. That just happens sometimes, and it was a great ball. And same thing with Donovan McIntosh giving up a touchdown late in the back half of the game to put Iowa State ahead. It was just a really good ball Donovan ends up biting a little bit on a double move. And again, that's going to happen in one-on-one coverage. I wish they would have had Donovan a little bit more in press, just because I think his arms like sort of make him built for being a press corner. But other than one player, I walked away pretty impressed with the entire defensive back room. VJ Payne had an awful game. VJ Payne was getting abused, borderline the entire game. That little RPO pop pass that Iowa State ran, I believe, in the fourth quarter, that should have been covered up by VJ Payne. VJ and Toby, for some reason, swapped responsibilities on that play, and that shouldn't happen. Toby is a freakishly athletic guy. Toby is also an edge rusher. He shouldn't be the one dropping into coverage, and VJ shouldn't be the one being forced to play in space on the backside of a running play, especially when the tight end is the lone receiver on that side, which I believe he was. So the responsibility should have been flipped, and I think in a lot of ways it looked like Toby was sort of compensating because he noticed, like, oh, wait a minute, there's no one behind me. Why isn't there anyone behind me? And there were also times that just VJ looked out of position. There were a few times he missed tackles. So it seemed like in a lot of ways Iowa State was picking on VJ Payne, and unfortunately it was working. And it sucks because VJ's been such a consistently good piece. This is probably the worst game that VJ Payne has had in his career at K-State. So all in all, I gave the defensive backs like a B+, but again, it would have been an A if just they didn't keep abusing VJ. And this also comes down to the defensive coordinator, that's Joe Klanderman. First half would have been an A+ pretty easily, and then the second half, I don't know what it was, he just didn't have the horses to keep up with the running game. And Iowa State picked up on the fact that, they're cheating one way or they're trying to cheat for the run, especially on that last play towards the flats, where, perfect world, you have the perfect play call for every single situation. And you do end up giving up only a little bit above 300 yards and end up containing Rocco Becht, who I still think is overrated, but is a good quarterback nonetheless. A B felt like a good grade to me because, there are certain things that I was like, what do you want him to do? Because so much of defensive coordinating is guessing, and whenever you have players that are sort of overplaying their hand in a new scheme, yeah, that's going to happen. So I ended up giving Klanderman a B. So, all in all, there were a lot of B's given out because there were a lot of moments that I was very impressed with the team, but there were an equal amount of moments where, even in the same position group, where I walked away remarkably disappointed. So the question sort of becomes, where does K-State go from here? I know that there's been a lot in the way of negativity in the K-State sphere about this game. I'm not going to pretend like I don't understand, because as I said, you may not be able to tell by the tone of the episode, but, this is the angriest I've been about a loss since the Tulane game. And it's even worse because, it's a conference game. It's your opening game, nationally televised in a different country. People are going to view it as a gimmick game where it ends up raining, and everyone is just going to find all these reasons to end up hating the game, when the reality of the situation is this was K-State beating K-State. Iowa State did just enough for them to not lose the game, and K-State didn't do enough to win it. And I know that sounds like a very obvious, nothing statement, but it doesn't make it any less frustrating. And the only thing to be done now is to just sort of go forward with what you can. So, and I think the other big downside of it is this is the biggest game that K-State is going to have until probably middle of October. So it's going to be, a long time before K-State gets a sort of big game again. And your first big game of the year is not only your first game of the year in general, but you lose it in a heartbreaking fashion up against one of your rivals. It's hard to sort of feel excited immediately after that, because I mean the next game that's going to be big for K-State is I think that's early October with Baylor. So you're going to have an entire month where you're going up against an FCS school in North Dakota, going up against Army that doesn't have Bryson Daly anymore. So I mean it's going to be a triple option, so that'll be fun. And then you're going to have Arizona, which is going to be a Friday night game in Arizona, so that's just going to be weird. Then you're going to go up against a UCF team that might fight for bowl eligibility, and then you have Baylor, who, could be anything. So this was the opportunity for K-State to grab momentum early and just sort of ride the momentum in the early part of the season. And I don't think that this game kills the season. What it does is it makes it a whole lot more difficult for K-State, and we're going to have to see if K-State can play with their backs to the wall. And I don't know. I don't, for the first time in the Kleiman era, I don't know if one of his teams is capable of truly playing with his backs to the wall. Because, yeah, you have one conference loss already. The people going to Arlington aren't going to have more than two. And even then, you're probably going to have a few only 2-loss in-conference teams, so you're going to get some really weird tiebreakers. So K-State, at the absolute worst, can only afford to lose one more conference game. And that includes the schedule of Baylor, who was really hot down the stretch this last season, against TCU, who has Josh Hoover and a really solid air raid offense, against a KU team in Lawrence that's going to have a new stadium and really wants to break the damn streak, against the best team that money could possibly buy in Texas Tech, against Utah in Utah. Those are 5 games of the remaining, 5 games of the remaining 8 conference games that K-State is going to have a whole lot of pressure, and I could see K-State losing. So this is sort of the ultimate put up or shut up time for this team. What they do against North Dakota is not going to move me about how this season is going to go, unless they're not going to lose to North Dakota. But, what they do against Army isn't going to move me. What they do against Arizona, cool, whatever. It's a Friday night game against Arizona. It's good to get Power 4 competition. The next game that is going to sort of, where, like it or not, where people are going to see the teams as on equal footing is Baylor. And that depends on how Baylor plays in the early part of the season. And it's just going to feel like a lull. It's not going to feel as exciting because people just got they basically just got the wind knocked out of them, where everyone's saying, K-State's going to be a 7-5 team, or K-State is going to finish at their floor at 8-4. There's no chance that they're going to be in the conference race. There's no chance that they're going to be even on the outside looking in or in any conversation for the college football playoff. They wasted all their talent. I don't think any of that is true. I think that this K-State team is still more than capable of making it to Arlington. It's the capability that bothers me, because I know damn well that they are capable of it. I know that it is possible. It is just a matter of them doing it. And it is the matter of them doing it that kind of worries me. Because as I said at the beginning of this segment, I don't know how this team is going to respond with having their backs up against the wall for the entirety of the season, especially with how it kind of looked like, especially offensively, they were playing tight at the beginning of the game. They weren't playing loose. They weren't slinging the ball around. I don't want to say it didn't look like they were having fun, because to me that is one of the... While I admit there is some truth to it, I do think teams that have fun with it play a lot better. I don't think it's the end-all, be-all, but it's feel what you have to feel with this game. I know I certainly have. And acknowledge the fact that those feelings are going to linger for a while, and just sort of see how this team is able to grow in these next few games. Because Iowa State pains me to say good team. Do I think we should have lost to them? No. But they're still a good team that's going to find themselves in the discussions for Arlington. People have already said, see you in Arlington. This is a take, and it's me being a homer, but I think it's still more likely that K-State makes it to Arlington than Iowa State. But just take the season as it comes. Acknowledge the fact that you're gonna be angry, and this is gonna hurt for a while. But hopefully, these next few games, the team will sort of grow into an identity that is their own. But I don't really want to talk about the game anymore. So thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. If you want to follow or contact the show, you can follow us just about anywhere at Aggieville Alleycats. And if you want to email us, we're AggievilleAlleycats@gmail.com. If you want to follow me on a more personal note, I am at ACEdwards00. My co-host, who is still in Ireland, is at Connor Balthazar. And if you want to support the show financially, please be sure to check out the official Aggieville Alleycats merch store, link found in our podcast and Twitter bio. But most importantly, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. For come rain, shine, or anything in between, even if there is a lot of rain, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news that you so love. Stay safe, Alleycats.